So basically what we did is wanted to get in touch with Senator Flanagan and bring to Governor Cuomo's attention the fact that under the system that we have now, schools are not getting the aid that they need. They don't have the basic funding that they can use for schools and that they're supposed to be using for schools, and that's why we're seeing a lot of budget cuts, like programs getting cut and so on and so forth. So we created an outline of a new system that we could use and presented it to Senator Flanagan. We had great reviews on it, and he's looking to push it to Governor Cuomo in this upcoming year, and this kind of just outlines that whole thing.
So the first thing we looked into was the CFE case. It began in 1995, and it was pretty much just the first original time the issue was brought up that students are not being provided the money to provide their sound and basic education, which was the conclusion of this case. And a sound and basic education was defined as the skills students need to be capable citizens and competitive workers in the global economy. By the end of the trial for CFE, the state was given 13 months to meet the standards, the safety standards. And the conclusion was that city schools were in need of $5.63 billion in additional operating aid and $9.2 billion for facilities just to provide the constitutional right of a sound and basic education. So following through the years, in 2006, New York State's highest court ruled that the state must provide the children with a sound and basic education for a second time. And in 2009, the aid was frozen at 37.5% of the 4-year target. Then, in 2010-2011, the aid was cut by $2.7 billion due to the gap elimination adjustment, otherwise known as the GEA. And from 2012 to now, the shortfall is between $5.5 billion between 2007's formula and the actual state aid, which leaves a total funding gap of over $7.7 billion, according to the New York State School Board Association.
So basically, the formula for New York State giving education grants to the schools is it's extremely warped, and basically it's just a whole bunch of random numbers that really don't make any sense. My friend Kelsey's going to go into it further and actually show you a segment of it and how it doesn't make any sense. We spoke to senators and they can't make any sense of it, and it really doesn't make any sense at all. So with inflation and the way the economy is working, really school districts should be getting more money every year. But with the formula that we have today, we are losing over $13 billion from New York State students and their education.
We chose Massachusetts because they're pretty much the greatest outline we can have for an education system. They're ranked highly on their test scores, and they have the best funding system in basically the nation. So what we did was we broke down the systems that are in place for New York State based on their funding formulas, and we compared them to that of Massachusetts. One is the foundation budget, the target local share, which is the target contribution Emily brought up earlier, the system of apportion, which is basically the division between the amount of money a school can contribute and then how much the state has to give to them in order to make up the difference. And then there's the aid, and the aid is how much the state will then give to them based on their annual needs, which is something that we don't do here in New York State. We don't necessarily update our numbers annually. We might give different funds as a whole, but as far as a breakdown of specific needs based on the schools and based on what the kids need each year, we don't look into any of those specific details. And this actually works to efficiently fill in that gap of time, how time has changed in schools, and what kids need annually. And then you take a look at the New York State formula, and not a single senator in New York State can explain the formula that they have in place. The people who are supposed to be running those numbers and the people who are supposed to be coming up with our aid don't know how they get those numbers. You can ask any of them and they don't know. And that's disturbing, the fact that we base our education system off of these flawed formulas, basically. And when you take a look at the formulas, the way to calculate some of them, it basically defines the term that you're supposed to be finding in the formulas. Okay, so the second part to what we broke down was the use of a foundation budget versus the New York State foundation aid. Now, Massachusetts works on the foundation budget, that's their core, along with the Chapter 70, and the foundation budget is how Massachusetts requires the total of K through 12 spending in each district to never fall below a certain amount. So the next part of the foundation budget is that it represents the total cost of providing what we are looking to achieve, which is the sound basic education for all students, and that's basically expressed in a per pupil expenditure. That's not necessarily something New York derives either. The per pupil expenditure in Massachusetts actually gets a number for every kid and says, this is how much money we can give to you towards your education. And in Massachusetts, that number is in the tens of thousands. It's pretty high. They give their kids about $16,000 to $17,000, just one kid alone in their education for that year. And then we take a look at the foundation aid for New York, and again, that's just a completely artificially floored system. That's not updated annually, and this is just a little chunk of that formula. And you can see how what I was saying before is, then we took a look at the target contribution, and that's how much money a state, in Massachusetts, how they say each district, how much money they can contribute to their education. And we compare it to what New York State created to kind of cover up the CFE case issue, the GEA. In Massachusetts, like I said, they use that target contribution, and that goes hand in hand with their foundation budget, in a sense that once the total foundation budget, that foundation aid, that foundation budget along with the target contribution, they go hand in hand. So then you add the Chapter 70 into that target contribution, the system laid out there, and it just determines by filling in the gap between the districts that require local contribution and then the foundation budget money. They just calculate the difference between these two steps, and that ensures that districts can fund the total baseline, that number, that below or above 1%, that actually determines if that foundation budget fits their needs. Along with the foundation budget, the target contribution is determined in just 3 steps. And like I showed you before, there's over 20 formulas. They only do it in 3. And they're very concise and they're very open about their formulas. They actually put it on all their state websites, which is impossible basically to find in the New York State website. And then we get to the gap elimination adjustment. Now the GEA itself is a huge problem, and that's something that people are actually trying to fight at the moment, because that's taking away the most money. They put the GEA in place when they were trying to cover up the fact that they didn't get rid of, or they didn't meet the demands of the CFE case. So what the GEA basically does is, under its original name, which was the Deficient Reduction Assessment, it basically reduces, and this is a quote from the state legislator, they reduce state support to public schools in order to help close the state's budget gap. So what they're doing with the GEA is saying, okay, how much money did we lose as a state? Let's just completely disregarding education, the money they should have put towards it. They're saying, okay, we're in this much debt as a state. How much money can we take out of education to fix our state debt problem? So they're taking money away from our future generations' education, and they're putting it to fix their own problems as a legislation. And that's a huge issue, and that's causing tons of debate throughout the state, and a lot of people are very upset. Based on the Constitution, based on a Supreme Court ruling, we still can't meet those demands. So, unfortunately, a group of teenage girls had to come up with the program to do that instead of our state senators. But we're making it, we're taking that initiative to do that, because it's not only affecting us and our fellow peers around the state, but it's going to affect our kids, it's going to affect our siblings, it's going to affect people for as long as they keep it in the system. You've seen annually we lose more than $13 billion, and it either goes back to trying to clean up the senator's mess. So we're looking to add this program because it does make sense, because it's simple. It's things that people can go back and they can appreciate and they can understand. Because right now, AP Calculus students, senators, no one understands what we're doing. And if New York State doesn't understand the system that they have in place, they need to change it and they need to make it better for everybody else. Next step.